Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. In today's edition of Yes Talks, we have with us Mr. Anil Grovor, who is going to talk about inner transformation through yoga. Yoga is change, a change for the better, a change so radical that instead of calling it just a change, we use words like transformation. It's a sort of a makeover within. And who better to tell us about it than Mr. Anil Grovor, who was exposed to Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's teachings right since birth, since his father was a devotee. I'll now request Aditi to give you a formal introduction to today's speaker before he begins.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to yet another Yes Talk. Today we have with us, as Sir mentioned, Anil Grovor. He is a founder of ATMATVA and an alumni of IIT-Roorkee and IIT-Delhi with 33 plus years of experience in the field of coaching and mentoring. And he has been helping people in the journey of inner transformation through individual sessions, group sessions across the globe, catering to diverse domain of industries. And his early introduction to Mother and Sri Aurobindo was, as Sir said, through setting up of a Sri Aurobindo society at his residence quite at an early age. And since 2000, in 2000, he moved to Hyderabad. And since then, he has been exploring and deeply immersed in the research related to human evolution and exploring different modalities like biography work, existential work, process work, leadership facilitation, how all of these things help humanity evolve in a more harmonized manner. In fact, that is how I got to know him. I have attended one of his workshops back in Auroville a few years ago, and he came across as a very reachable person and a very easy to talk to person who can help you see things. And that is why I'm very grateful for him to accept our invitation and speak in the forum today. We welcome you, Anil, and looking forward to your session. Over to you.
Switch on the video and unmute it.
Thank you, Ramesh Bhai. Such a privilege to be sitting next to you and doing this. And thank you, Aditi, for such kind words. Can I request everyone to put on your videos? I really don't want to speak to blank screens. And Aditi, for myself, I'll put it on a gallery mode. I can see, so I can see some of you now, and hopefully as we go along, others will also put on. I can see some familiar faces. So thank you. Thank you for joining in today. First of all, what I'm going to speak today is both ancient and cutting edge. Ancient, of course, because it's based on the deepest wisdom of thousands of years of Yoga Sutras, which goes back 2,500 years and is probably the most comprehensive psychology system in the world. Then we have the Vedanta, we have the Upanishads, and yet over the last 1 year, leveraging decades of experience of some of the truly eminent people in India and the US and forming a cohort to co-evolve this since last August over in intensely week after week. And we are just completing that cohort on the coming Wednesday. It's been a very interesting exercise on synthesizing, co-evolving, and bringing everything together in a way that in a contemporary form, it can be offered for leadership, coaches, and healers. So what I'm going to share today has not been shared before. We are still in the process of publishing the papers, as well as possibly next year, you will see some of this being brought out with IIM Ahmedabad and a few other contexts. So let me just share from that context. So that's the context, the credit. So first of all, mistakes I made are mine, but the people who have really done the true work for like Raghu Anant Narayanan for over 50 years as a direct disciple of Krishnamacharya and then Desikacharya, and someone who has also met and spent time with J. Krishnamurti, has been my mentor and friend and guide for this for over a decade, and one of the prime drivers of this. Similarly, Prasad Kaipa, based in San Jose, doing a lot of work in this space in Vedanta as a visiting faculty, also to ISB, has been this. And we have we have found some of this, and those two people, along with about 16 of us, who could complete the year-long journey. We started with 35 to 40, uh, and all of them were CEO level and other levels. So with that background, I dive into the theme of the day. First of all, one of the key aspirational state that we have is to have a coherence in our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, because true ananda is not possible unless you can have that coherence. Whereas what is our actual state? We usually have some kind of fragmentation, some kind of incongruence. So as a threefold being in the man, where thoughts and feelings and action are there, whenever there's something is out of balance, we we feel some dissonance inside. And essentially this transformation is, how can we be established firmly in a yogic presence, inner coherence. And so this is what is Antaranga Yoga, which is the yoga that is about looking in, because unfortunately, primarily in the West and now even in India, yoga tends to be associated with asana and pranayam. Uh, that's an important part for the preparation of the instrument. But if you look at Yoga Sutras, for instance, out of the 192 aphorisms that codify the entire Yoga Sutra in 4 chapters, only 3 are about asana and pranayam. Everything else is about the quality of the mind, the nature of the mind, and the very definition of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which is silencing the mind, channelizing the activities of the mind. So what I'm going to speak about is the mind psychology, the inner psychodrama today. Now, and why do we speak about it, and why do we need to experience it? Because ultimately, only when we go into our inner journey, where we have inner mastery of different levels based on the individual, can we have a deep level of self-awareness? Can we have the contextual intelligence as to what to do in what context? And can we develop the capacity for deep listening, which is ultimately the capacity that leads to how we interact with the world around? Uh, Once again, I would request, if those people who have joined now, if you could put on your video, that would be very nice. I love to see the faces, because you can draw. I can go as deep as you want me to go, but if I don't even see you, I don't know where to go. Now, some of the vocabulary that we have kind of finalized as recently as last week after this year-long evolution, I'll be using now, and I will be using both the English terms and the Sanskrit equivalents. So there are 4 possible fields in any interaction we have with the world. So the first is the avidya kshetram, which I will call the entropic field. So the chaos we see in the world outside, and or we experience that there is a chaotic world, that's what I'm calling the entropic field. The second is the dharma kshetram. Dharma, as per yoga, is what enlivens me, enlivens the other, and enlivens the context. That is dharma. Dharma is not religion. Dharma is every action, what enlivens us. So we will call it the enlivening field. The third is the dhyana kshetram, which is the enlightened field, which is the field of the pratyahara, where we withdraw the senses, look inward, look at all the psychodrama, and through some grace coming in with the mother's grace, dissolve this, which have been the vasanas and the samskaras, which have been the deeply rooted conditioned patterns, which have been driving our behaviors. And the fourth is Satchitananda, which is the ecstatic field. That is the true Ananda. So I will take you through usually I would not describe these fields. We would actually go through an experiential thing. And of course, I'm trying to compress years of work into an hour. And even with the cohort, we did a year-long work into an hour or less, actually, half an hour or so. So bear with me that we can't do much experiential. So my intent is, if your takeaway is just what it takes to go through the real journey in life, to that people say, I want self-realization, I want liberation, I want to be the sthit prajna. But those are fantasies unless you have a step-by-step practical way, the sadhana, to get there. And the sadhana also needs to be tailored to each aspirant. It cannot be a general purpose kind of a thing. But there is some particular science to it, which has been through people's contemporary experience, has been codified in multiple contexts, in organizations, leaderships, and individuals. So this yogic presence that we are seeking to establish, whether you are a leader, whether you are a coach, whether you are a healer or an aspirant in any path, is fundamentally to discover the third, the dhyana kshetram. And you can then commit to practices which obviously are tailored to you. They cannot be abstract practices which are generic, through which your discovery of yourself is matured and you get firmly anchored in the inner space, right? So let me first go to the first space, which is the avidya kshetram, which I call the entropic field. Now, usually in this field, our interaction with the world is about what are the problems to be solved? How do I manage the other? Majority of our experience in the world is about this. So in this, the world is kind of broken up in individual entities, and an individual is separate from the rest. It's just a fragment of the whole, right? And so if I am an actor, and throughout my talk today, when I refer to actor, it's I am an actor in the world, then I'm different from other actors. And just imagine like a billiard balls, right? There's so many billiard balls and they're like bouncing off. That's our view in the avidya kshetram. So our attention is usually turned outward, and we are looking at what are the opportunities, what are the threats, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses. So the SWOT analysis kind of a thing that people do. How do I engage with the world from this? So how do we participate in this space in the outer drama? We just don some masks, some personas, right? And or we put up some armors so that we are not hurt. And whatever you think appropriate is the mask and the armor, you go in the world with that. Now, because I'm doing this in context of an interaction of, let's say, a mentor or a coach or a leader with another person, it's important to understand that throughout today's conversation, with the two, where is the coach situated? Only and that will define the kind of container that is created for the coachee, the other person, to go deep, or a mentor and a client, whatever you name it. So if the client has a mooring here where they have a habitual way of interacting with the world, with others, and they keep reinforcing their entropic patterns, and if the coach is also anchored there, many new coaches who just go for a training and think now they've got the techniques and they can turn a coach, and they are into problem solving mode with their client. All that happens is the container that gets created is also a Vidya Kshetram, and all you will end up doing is you will have problem solving mechanisms. You will have an urgency for the competency development, and this will get entrenched. So in yoga, of course, there is this image of the tree where the roots are a Vidya, Asmita is the trunk, and the Raga and the Dvesha are the branches, and Abhinivesha is there, which is the fear of death, and Raga and Dvesha, which are the attraction and the aversion, are important. I'll not go in details. I'm sure in Jess talk somewhere or the other, some of those would have been covered or will be covered. But the idea is the avidya kshetram, we are operating with the world at a level of problem solving. And that, in my mind, probably is the majority of the experience people have in their interaction with the world in the contemporary context. Now let's come to the second field, which is the Dharma Kshetra. This is what we said is the enlivening field, right? Once again, can I request people to turn on the videos if you can, because I only see 4 or 5 people and it's kind of disconcerting to just see names. So then here in the Dharma Kshetram, we begin to turn the attention to ourselves. So this is when we honestly begin to evaluate what are the inner processes that are happening in me. We begin to celebrate our authentic expression in the world. We mourn our inability to unfold our potential in the world. We seek healing. We seek a compassionate mirror where one can see itself. And that's where the coaches or mentors come in, right? Unless a person is willing to have someone be a mirror, there is no point working with that person. So this is the starting point where we seek. And this is the inner space where the inner drama is being played out. And what we call in our model that we have evolved, archetypical inner figures, and I'll speak about that in a moment, they begin to emerge. Now here, what is happening is the actor is taking off their mask, is taking off their armor, and it is preparing for the next encounter. Now, if the coach is anchored in the Dharma Kshetra, then the coaching space or the container, either it can get seeded in the Dharma Kshetra itself, or it may be in the liminal space between the enlivening space of the coach and the entropic field of the client. Because it depends on the client where they are. Are they ready to even begin to step into this field? And if they begin to step in, when do you fully step in? That's up to them. You can never force it. So all you can do is create a safe and trusted container for the client to step in and begin to experience this space and begin to experiment with this space, right? And so I mentioned how the archetypical inner figures become alive. So out of and we have already spoke of actor as one of the archetypical inner figures. There are out of the 8, I will speak of now 4 more, which are the problematic ones. Now, the first is the thing to understand about these archetypical figures is they are like the repetitive soap opera. The same script will go on and on. So what is the distilled essence? So first is the victim. The victim goes on about, poor me. I'm always misunderstood. Watch out, I'll be hurt again. The second archetypical figure is the judge. I should not have. I must. I deserve to be punished. And the judge has these 2 able friends, the prosecutor and the defender, who are constantly there, where prosecutor says, I am guilty because, and the defender says, I'm not guilty because. And then the third archetypical figure is guardian, who says, I am ready and I'm vigilant. And the world is a hostile place and it is full of potential danger. And the fourth is the beckoner, who says, let me just run away. Just have fun. So these are some of the voices which end up creating the insecurity, the defensiveness, and the suspicion in us. And this inner cacophony, like a broken record, will create a prison. It will harden into inner structures where now our story has become a concrete reality for us. And more we listen to the story, the lonelier and the more helpless do we become. Okay. Once more, a request, if you can put on the video, please do so. Then the next is the Dhyana Kshetram, which is the enlightening field. Now, in this, one begins to observe one's inner processes with a certain degree of lucidity and courage. And it begins to gain insight into how one is constructing one's identity. And one owns up to one's own dysfunctional processes. One affirms one's functional processes. And we bring light to our shadow selves. So here the vasana and the samskara, which are the conditioned patterns of feeling, thought, and action, are seen very clearly. And the dynamics of expression of vasana and samskara through the role one plays in certain contexts are also being witnessed fully. So here, the inner space where these subtle movements are being experienced, from the Natya Shastra in India, there are the Navrasas. So these are the subtlest form, even below the emotions. Like if the emotion is anger, the rasa will be of Rodra. So if you have seen Bharatnatyam or if you have seen dances, they actually express some of this. Similarly, if the emotion is love, the rasa is Shringara. If the emotion, and they are connected to the archetypical times. For instance, the victim archetype I spoke about has bhayam, which is fear. So fear is an emotion beneath which the rasa, which is even beneath, I'm sure I can have interesting discussion with Ramesh Bhai later, but even beneath the physiology of creation, this is even subtler than that. Now, this is the space where the actor will rest and the Sakhi Bhava awakens. Now, in the Indic wisdom, in the Indic tradition, the Sakhi is a person who with great integrity and care will remove the veil that covers our eyes and will peel away the mask that we believe to be our face. So now the person can ask, in doing what I was doing, what I was really doing. If you take the entire essence of Bhagavad Gita and put it in one line, it's only this. In doing, what am I really doing? So one can begin to ask that question. How was my inner drama really playing out? How do I replenish myself and grow? And the person becomes aware of the nature and structure of one's identity, which is composed of these archetypical inner figures. And one begins to see how are these different archetypical inner figures fed or starved. That is, how is one nourishing oneself? And how does that get reflected in the nature of one's engagement with the world? So the Sakhi Bhava of the coach, it can be nuanced into two aspects. One is the Sakhitvam, where the listening comes from a space that holds the energy of compassion and hope. And the second aspect is Matritva, where the listening comes from a silence that is energized by compassion and love. Now on to the fourth space, the Satchit Anand Kshetram, which is the ecstatic field. Now, this is the sacred center where one rests in Shantam, which is a state of silence and profound awareness. So here, the one's being is nascent and it is pregnant with the possibility of unfolding with all its unique gifts, which are unhindered now with vasana and sanskara. Right? So this is the ground of consciousness. And here, the actor and all the archetypical inner figures dissolve. Consciousness is. Now, if the coach can anchor in the meditator with it, that is, if the coach can listen from Shantam and silence, there is a possibility of enabling the coachee also to listen from a quiet space. When that happens, the Dharma Kshetra will morph into the Dhyana Kshetra. And the coachee will enter the enlightening field, where Swadharma, Swabhava, and Swatantrata unfold. And why is that important? Swadharma is defining what's my destiny work in this world? What is the unique dent I can make in the universe without constantly being pulled by the vasanas and sanskaras. So bhava, what is my innate nature that is seeking to unfold my highest potential and swatantrata? That's true freedom. Hoisting flag is not true freedom. That is the true inner freedom. And if the coach is anchored in matritva bhava also, then this unfolding is nurtured. So then the dharma kshetra will become strong, old identities of the coachee will dissolve, and the four problematic archetypical inner figures will be healed and transformed. And the heroic potential of the coachee will unfold and express themselves. Now, the Sakshi is quiet, still, and aware of every nuance of self. But this very silence and stillness makes it difficult to become aware of it or value it sometimes, because we don't even know there is a Sakshi inside. And it is only in times of despair, maybe some enlightened people go beyond it, but for ordinary people like me, only in the times of despair, when all our strivings have come to a knot, that we give up almost, that's when by accident, the inner cacophony ends and the silence of the meditator, the Sakshi within, Sakshi comes alive, and that resonates with the psyche. Right? I guess the psychic being in integral yoga, truly experiencing that is an experience of that Sakshitvam for me. Now, the archetypical inner figures, the prison guards, because they had formed a prison, they're the prison guards. They're not broken parts of us which we have to discard. No. Once they get free from the tiring drama that they were constantly acting out inside us, they are craving to play a very important life-giving role in our life. So what happens? The victim now possesses the capacity to heal the pain and sorrow of oneself and others. So the victim becomes the healer. The guardian yearns to stand up for justice. So guardian becomes the warrior. The judge sees her ability to discern rules from wisdom and provide guidance. So the judge becomes wise. And the beckoner, no longer needing to escape, now can create, have various creative options. So the beckoner can become true seeker. And anchored in the Sakhi and Sakshi, the very parts of us which were constraining us, which were blocking our prana because of the inner structures, they now manifest our dreams. And this is not a linear thing, it's a spiral. So there is a spiral of practices we need to do to realize the state of Sthit Prajna. And who is a Sthit Prajna? Again, I'm sure in Yes Talk, some of it may have come along, but I'll, at least for this context, the definition of Sthit Prajna for me is a person who is deeply aware, sensitive, contemplative, anchored in consciousness, not triggered by fear or desire, whose actions are sourced in intelligence. So this transformation, if we now summarize and look at the different fields and how that we have gone about, in the inner transformation journey, truly the first step is to decode and heal one's own entropic field. So you cannot be a leader or a coach or a healer till you have done this work yourself. So first, decoding and healing one's own entropic field, you have to get to the root cause of dukkha, right? Which is there in the avidya kshetra. And that will happen through the work in the archetypical inner figure, the rasa work. I have not spoken about the mandala work, which is about looking at some of the how we are received with the world and how we express in 4 different quadrants. And that's very deep world and looking at this drama. And then we have to transition to the enlivening field, which is the Dharma Kshetram. And there we practice the Pratyahara so that we can anchor ourselves in love and compassion, so that the Sakhitvam and the Matritvam can come alive in us. And then we transition to the enlightening field, which is the Dhyana Kshetra. So there, what do we practice? Karma, Shukla, Akarshanam, which is we learn to anchor ourselves in silence and tranquility. So that's the Sakshitvam piece, which becomes the ground in us. And then we have to nurture these 4 presences. It's not like, okay, I've climbed the Everest, I've come down, right? It's a lifelong daily practice where we have to nurture the 4 presences. And what are the presences? So the Sakhitvam, Sakshitvam, Matritvam, and the 4th is Kartritvam. We have to act in the world. Only then the coherence that we started with, the thinking, feeling, and action, will come into coherence in a way that we can be a true yogi. And with that, I'll take a pause. And I am aware that I have flooded you with a lot of things. You may have to go back and watch the recording or come back with clarification, or later on as we publish some papers, go through that or experience some of this in workshops that will come up in 2023 and beyond, because right now we are doing invite only. But essentially, I want to open it up for interaction and see what emerges, and based on that interaction, this group, what we learn together.
Can I say something?
Sure, Mitu.
Yeah. While you were narrating about the different, you can say, fields and how uh, one can actually lead oneself and also come out of it. So I was reminded of this Upanishadic tale about the Dwasuparna, where there is a bird who's sitting on the branch and then climbing. So uh, is it something like, because of course, as you said, there were lots of terms and all. So I was taking a little bit of time, but what was coming to my mind again and again was this tale of Dwasuparna, how the bird who's sitting on the lower branch, stepwise, with lots of experiences on the way, to some bitter and some sweet experiences and all. Finally, it is emerges with the self, the bird which is on top, which is actually the witness earlier. So I was just maybe a kind of an affirmation that what I was thinking is was not I wasn't going really round in circles, and maybe is there some corollary between the two? Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. The bird who is the witness is directly the witnessing presence, which is the Sakshitvam. And the merger that you beautifully speak of is that true oneness, when we no longer are the billiard balls going around and we recognize the oneness that comes beyond the individuation. So we all have to individuate, and then only we can experience that oneness. So that bird story is directly speaking to the Sakshitva of the witnessing bird is the Sakshi. And just to add to that, many you people attend many workshops or conduct many workshops, and you would probably have small group sharing. If you ever do small group sharing, it's always very powerful to have 3 people in the group. And the roles are a speaker, a listener who is being a Sakhi, another listener who is going as Sakshi. And sometimes you have 4 people, another listener who is being a Matratvam. But let's not go to 4. Even if you have 3, why is it important? If you have just pairs sharing with each other, and if you don't have a Sakshi, if you don't have the witnessing presence, the quality of conversation will be very different from when you are listening as a Sakshi present in the triad. Secondly, most people listen to respond or listen to agree or disagree. That is not listening. most people tend to get into advice. That is not listening or Sakhitvam or Sakshitvam. So while Sakhi role is held by a friend, this is not a friend who is saying, Arey yaar, aise kar lo, kyun pareshan ho rahe kinds. You're not getting into advising mode. Your role is to truly see the person, hold the space, and the Sakhi can share what is getting evoked in her or him. The Sakshi need not even speak or share, but they can observe what's happening in their own body. Because if you are truly in a Sakshi space, you will be in resonance with what are the rasas being evoked in the speaker's body as that person is getting the emotion. And if they say, okay, I can see something is happening in my heart region or in the belly, very often the conversation will go very deep because the speaker is not even aware of their body. And some of these traumas are deeply held in the body. And if, like Mother says, we have to transform at cellular level, unless we get in touch with these. And that's a very powerful role of the Sakshi. And ultimately, we have to find the Sakhi within, the Sakshi within, and the Matritvam within. But we first need that outside, because it's very difficult to have the broken record going on. Also, all this built in without that companion. But your story was very, very to the point. Witnessing presence is Sakshi.
Okay, there's nobody asking. I just have a quick question. How do you take into account the role of time in this process?
Say more. When you say role of time, just expand on that.
As in, like the process which you explained, there's a sense of movement in the whole process. Like even how Mithudi was talking about, like moving from one quadrant to another quadrant. But we also understand that we live at multiple levels. It's not so linear as you speak. There's a
No, it is not.
possibility. So then even as a coach or even as a coachee, when I'm sitting, how do you make me understand the process in a much more simultaneous way and give me a sense of wideness that it's a process which will unfold with time? So what is that approach? Because if I just mentalize what you're saying, like while you were speaking, it's very clear to me what you said. But the moment you said the last word about the action part, I could sense a sense of like recoil in me, like, oh, there's action also involved, like that kind of sense. And then immediately all these things came in, like, okay, when does the action part come? Because I'm so absorbed in working on myself that I often feel myself a little distant from the action part. So what's your take on that?
So when we work on the mandala through experiences, there are 4 quadrants in that. And if you draw a y-axis and an x-axis, and the quadrant 1 is when you are fully received by the world and you are fully in expression. And it's the quadrant of Matritvam. Usually it is the quadrant we are born in, some of the parental influence, early parental influence that we have, and possibly right at the womb stage itself, and early stage with the parents. And every quadrant we have our own vasana and our own samskaras. There are some dysfunctional parts of things we move into when we encounter a certain context. There is a Davic possibility when we unleash our highest potential. And there is an Asuric possibility if we use it in wrong way. So every quadrant will have those. Now, in quadrant 1 lie some of the deepest hurts and wounds, which we may not even be aware of because they usually are from the precognitive, pre-language stage. Usually the prarabdha karma is set by 5 years of age, and we don't even have what we brought in, and so we don't even have a conscious memory of it. But it's very important through body, and body is the only portal to actually get in touch with some of that and bring it out, and then through Sakhi and Sakshi be able to look and dissolve. Now the time element, I know people who go to psychologists and do it for 30 years and they still are not able to do it. But I also know people who have, even in the last 1 year cohort that we have done, I have seen people go deep. But the important part is it cannot start from the head. The portal is the heart. So the creation of the heart space and connection at the heart space is a non-negotiable. If they are trying to understand this through the mind, they are not even ready. Now coming to the second quadrant is when we engage with the world. So I am expressing, but I'm being rejected by the world. So that is when we, our guardian comes up and we get wounded and we hesitate to go in those spaces because we don't like. And we can often retreat to quadrant 3, where neither am I expressing, nor am being received. So that's the exile or the hermit stage that you describe, where I don't want to act because it's very, I like to actually introspect and understand the space, right? And then the quadrant 4 is the space where I am still not expressing, but I'm being received by the world. So there, usually a teacher, hopefully an Aptavachna, who is really a realized teacher, not one of the, is walking with you as a mentor in the journey so that you can begin to see these things. My experiences, for instance, when we will offer this from next year for coaches who are trying to go from stage 2, level 2, which is a PCC level, professional coaching level, which requires at least 500 hours of coaching they've already done and certain certifications they have already done or equivalent, to MCC, which is a mastery level, which is 2,500 hours or something. People, if they truly do that, they need 10 years at least. I have been trying to do it for decades and I'm still not there. I think I'm still scratching the surface. So, and yet, the hope is, it's like the moment you see one dimension and it dissolves, it suddenly shifts everything. Every moment is also new. We have been stuck in it for decades anyway. So even when any one thing dissolves, the whole configuration is like kaleidoscope. So there is, so when I work with clients, if I'm working with an individual, like, I always tell them as a coach, I'll take at least 9 months a journey for just like a baby to be born. With an organization, multi-year journey. This might actually, if they truly want to have mastery, it may be a multi-year journey with a combination of one-to-one group work and very personalized mentoring based on that person's need. This is not something that can be done as a casual thing. You cannot do a certificate course and say, now I'm a yogi coach or a yogi leader. It's a spiral.
Got it. Thank you.
Someone had put their hand up.
Yes, that was Smriti. Smriti, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, my apologies. I was taking my walk, but I wanted to be part of the session, and I'm glad I did. So my question is, I mean, if one is not getting into a cohort, I mean, I've been practicing yoga for 18 years, and I think I know some of it, but like you said, it's not always that you stay in one state. You kind of also sometimes dip in certain contexts. You don't stay there in the, say, the third stage. So how does one keep practicing? How does one practice? What's the practical thing that I can do?
So first of all, when you say you have been practicing for 18 years, what have you been practicing recently?
What do you mean? What
Is your practice? What is your daily practice?
My daily practice. So I try to do yoga 3 times a week. And
What is yoga? Actually, the term yoga is confusing for me.
Okay, sure. So I do the asanas, I do the pranayam, and I do the meditation.
Yeah. So these 3 things, if you, in what I was describing the Antra yoga, Antaranga yoga. Asana and pranayam are the preparation of the body and the mind to be able to begin to do that. So, so that you are kind of centered enough to do that. You're not sthiram sukham, and you have a, so you are able to do that. Even meditation. Meditation is a word now in the West packaged in many ways in yoga, but what I'm describing is about the inner psychodrama scene, where the dimension of meditation I'm speaking of is when you are able to see all the inner archetypes, inner dramas, and dissolve it. You can do the way you describe yoga for 50 years and that still doesn't happen, because it's a hygiene. What you described as yoga is like a daily bath. It's inner cleansing that is every day, but it is not unpeeling the layers of mass that we have been born with and have acquired. And
So how
meditation
does one
is
do
good.
that?
So that was the topic here. So did you join late?
No. I was here, but I'm practically, what does one do beyond what one is doing?
Correct. So that's where, as I was describing very practically, we have to experience some of these archetypical inner figures through certain artwork, certain meditations. We have to experience certain rasas in a much deeper way. We have to experience and do some of the quadrant work to see how that's playing. We have to do certain group work and one-to-one work. Practically, that's the only path. The sacred space to be created and the container to be created where it can be done. And unfortunately, there are very rare spaces that one finds, even though yoga is very prevalent.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. At this point, no better answer, because it's very difficult to without. And one point I'll share: when last year we were to start this cohort, originally a year and a half back when we were planning, we thought it'll be a hybrid model. We will have, and since there were several people from US, 50% from US, 50% from India, we thought it'll come together, but because of Corona, that was very difficult. And we were skeptical, even though I have been doing over Zoom and Skype for over a decade, my work across the world, we're still skeptical we can do this kind of deep work over Zoom. I'm delighted that at least with this cohort, in the last 1 year, we're blown away by the depth of shift that has happened on Zoom. So I would still opt for a hybrid model whenever feasible. But one does that work in communities that come together and do it.
All right.
So that also maybe, since I feel your question is not fully answered, one exercise that I can give to all of you is to check for what is the level of your engagement with the world. And I will define 4 types of engagement. And it is from the yogic lens. So first level of engagement with the world, degree of engagement, is what we call ati yogam. What does it mean? Where the psyche is over engaging. So that's why it's ati, with the external world. And it is over investing in some of the evocations it craves for, or it is becoming vigilant to certain provocations that it holds in aversion. So your raga and dvesha are kind of swaying your psyche, and you are engaged with your senses in outer world and over engaged. So that's ati yogam. The next type of engagement with the world is Hina Yogam, which is your psyche withdraws, that's why Hina, from the external world, and it engages minimally because it is clinging to some of its old patterns, and it is suppressing the intensity of both the evocations and the provocations that it is experiencing, right? I think, Aditi, you were describing something like that. Third is Viyogam, which is now psyche is completely disengaged from the outer world and completely repressing the inner evocation. And the fourth is the yogam, which is our goal, where psyche is encountering the world with the same level of intensity and quality as the evocation or the provocation. And it returns to an undisturbed state the moment the invitation or the challenge has ended. So only then will your responses will be accurate, they'll be appropriate, and you will truly be doing dharmic action, whereas which means you are enlivening yourself, you're enlivening the context, and you feel a wholeness. So all of you can check, am I doing Ati Yogam? Am I doing Hina Yogam? Am I doing Vyogam? And what will it take for me to move to Yogam? So I think that is something to encounter. The second very practical thing in your body, because body is the source and rasa. So, just now, again, the same thing, the Yogam thing, I can say like a crystal. You put a rose next to it, it'll take the color of the rose. Now you take the rose away, the color is gone, right? Similarly, the rasas we experience, and in the Indic dance form, there are nav rasas. The idea is there is no rasa that is good or bad. We should be able to experience any rasa, but don't let it leave a residue. We should be able to come back to that state of inner tranquility and silence. It's only when the inner structures get formed and the rasa keeps getting accumulated. So what are the rasas? So first is the rasa of Shingaram, which is of love, which is the friend or the Sakhi who helps begin that transformation process. The second is the rasa of Rodram, anger, right? So that's the rasa of the guardian who has to become the warrior. And it's not bad. Anger is not bad. But if you're holding on to anger, then it builds up and there is a lot of issue that happens. Third is Viryam. So the actor has to have the Viryam, the courage to go on this heroic quest. If they don't have that courage, then the life's gifts are wasted. The fourth is Hasyam, laughter. So the dreamer, which comes alive when you have done this inner work with the Sakhi and the Sakshi, that's when this dreamer comes alive, and that's when you can experience the Ananda. The fifth is Karuna, compassion. So the meditator always have to have both compassion and equanimity. So Karuna and Shantam. Sixth is Bibhitsam, disgust. So the judge usually has disgust and has to, transcend that, end that constant judging, and we tend to be very self-critical. The seventh is Bhayanakam, fear. So again, mother talks a lot about the fear. Fear, and where do we experience in the body? And then is Adbhutam, the wonderment, especially, oh, let me do this, let me do that, let me do that workshop also. Now the exercises, where in our body do we usually experience these rasas? Are you experiencing, like when I was doing this exercise, it was very interesting for me that I discovered that the anger was at my backside, all other rasas were my front side. And I was debriefing it with my Meeta, my wife is here on the call, and she pointed it out to me. And it was like, oh my God, that's why for 45 years, I didn't even acknowledge there was any anger in me till it was explicated and it blew up, right? So it's very interesting to see whether I'm seeing, and sometimes am I not experiencing something? Am I experiencing over too much of it? Where in my body I'm experiencing? So these two things of how much am I turning the gaze inward and where am I experiencing in my body what emotion, even if you can't right now go to the level of rasa, is an important practical starting point. Does that help you at least go to the, and this you can do in Yoga Nidra. The best way to do it, go into Yoga Nidra and do this. Any other questions?
If you can just tell what is the last level of engagement you mentioned? You mentioned 4
Yoga.
stages. Yoga.
Yogam.
Yeah.
Yogam. So that's the
Okay.
true yoga. Rest of all are qualified with, they are not true yoga.
Sure. Okay, we can just still take up 1 or 2 questions if there is anybody who wants to share something or ask something. We can
Thank you.
wait for a few seconds.
Yeah,
Yes, Srividya.
Srividya,
Yes.
and then Smriti.
Thank you for your talk. I came in a few minutes late, so if my question is not in perspective, please pardon me. I just wanted to understand when you're talking about the stages in terms of yoga, you say Viyogam, from completely disengaged we go to Yogam. How does that happen?
No.
Or have I got it wrong?
No. We don't from Vyogam go. I was just saying our attitude towards interacting with the world could be any of the 4.
Okay, so it's not a
They're not
stepwise
stages.
journey.
They're not
Okay.
stages. They're distinct attitude in different people.
Okay. Okay.
And usually the yogam is something we go through after a journey, each of us. The first 3 are our natural tendencies based on our own life experiences and propensities.
Right. I get that.
And even in that, the first 2 are more likely. I rarely find the third one, which is you're completely cut off.
Okay. Okay, that helps me understand that. One more question. I mean, from a spiritual coaching, if there is time, otherwise I'll probably text you.
Go ahead, ask the question.
From an integral yoga coaching perspective and the so-called corporate PCC, ICF, I mean, is there, I feel there may be, as a coach, what is your journey? Are there places where they merge together? Is there a place where it disconnects? I'm just curious to understand this.
Very good question. So I was just saying PCC and equivalent because that's a term well understood. And you must be a certain stage of readiness. And it's not our intention to certify as MCC. I think while I've got certified at different credentials with Coach for Life, Peter Redding in the US, the idea is not about the credentialing part. We can partner with anyone and they can do the competency part. We are doing the capacity part. Now, up to a PCC level, which is a professional coach level. So usually what tends to happen is when people do level 1, an ACC level, 100 hours and kind of experience. And usually I find they end up just doing a lot of students and family members and just get the hours. You can do 5,000 hours of similar kind of people and still not be a good coach. So the idea is, how do you build inner presence to be in that kind of listening to the other person? And while there is importance of credentialing institutions in their own right, I am a no fan of somebody else stamping on you that you are a good coach. I resist. I was already coaching for many years before I got at least the accredited thing to just understand what they do. But if you are a spiritual coach and you truly want to have that yogic presence to deepen your spiritual coaching practice, you have to go through this journey in your own way to actually have the presence. So Smriti, you had raised your hand.
So I wanted to share something.
Sure.
So experiencing, emotions in the body. One is whenever I'm feeling that I'm not getting where I want to in my work, I experience pain in the knee. And then I know that I have to get into action because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's what. And in NLP also, I learned that knee pain is associated with low self-esteem. So, so like that, I guess with so many years of yoga, I have a higher awareness, not all the time, but many times, of what's happening in my body. The second thing was that sometimes some coaches are ready to receive certain level of coaching and some are not. So I guess that as a coach also we should be able to assess, because I have in executive coaching, I've done stuff like redecision therapy, but I know certain coaches are not ready for that. So of course you have to educate them also a little bit. And third was how can you've given us some ways of learning or doing some practical work. Can one? I'm reading Vedanta treatise by S. Parthasarathi. Yeah. So I'm reading that. I'm halfway through, but I know I will have to reread it. It's not going. I'm not going to absorb it so easily. How can I read more about it, and how can I get to know more about this? Because certain terms were not that clear to me. How can I learn more about it?
Sure. So the very quick answer, I'm aware we are touch 7. So one is, yeah, the knee, and is it the right knee?
Yes.
Which is the future, going into the future. The second part was around what was the second comment?
The coachee may not be ready.
Yeah, so there we can only hold the space. And when we, like I was sharing, if you are established at a level, you can only take if you are, let's say, established at the deepest level, they can, in your presence, begin to, at their own pace, have the capacity to go deeper. But if a coach is not even established at that level, there's no possibility for them. And having said that, there are some who still will not have the self-reflexivity to do it. And you have to say, maybe you're not ready. The third part that you said, where you can read. So, so there is Raghu Anantnarayanan has published many books. His latest 2022 book is on the 5 powers, and he uses the Mahabharata lens also for some of this work, and that's very interesting. We didn't have time to. That can also be mapped to the same model. And Ritambra website may have some things. I myself have for several years, more than a decade ago, been associated with the Parthasarathi Vedanta School, Bhagavad Gita, and other things. Vedanta treatise was a prerequisite for that. But my experience, Smriti, is what I'm describing, it goes beyond reading.
Yeah.
It actually is not something we can do with intellectual knowledge. It has to be an experience before the knowledge in a certain context. That's been my journey. And I'm an avid reader, or was an avid reader.
So are you based in Hyderabad?
That's right. I'm based in Hyderabad right now, just travel.
So I'm also in Hyderabad.
Okay, great.
Love to meet you sometime.
Sure. So over back to you, Aditi, to sign up, and maybe you would like to come here.
Both be together.
We can both be together.
Yes, maybe if Dr. Bislani would like to say a few words and then we can close.
I really enjoyed listening to Anilji, because I've heard so many talks on yoga, but the type of images and metaphors that he brought in made it so interesting and relatable. And some of the 2 reflections that I would share with you. One is that we talk so much about yoga from the integral perspective, as Anilji also did today, but our conditioning to think of yoga in terms of asanas and pranayamas is so strong that still towards the end, and I'm sure she was not the only one, many were still thinking of yoga in terms of asanas and pranayamas, not the only one who asked this question. So we have to get out of this conditioning and realize that those practices are not all of yoga. They are, as Anilji said, only for preparing the instrument. Yoga is not only about preparing the instrument, but also provides guidance on how to use the instrument. And without that, it does not really become a spiritual discipline. Another thing to which Anilji might in fact want to respond is, he said that these 4 kshetras essentially determine how we interact with our environment, how we interact with others in the world. In other words, what type of personality we have. And that is what the 3 gunas are about. And there may be a rough correspondence which I could see between the avidya kshetra and tamas and unbridled rajas. But when we go to the next one, that is the dharma kshetra, it is rajas which has been tempered by sattva. And the third one, dhyana kshetra, is sattvic. And the last one, the yogam or the Satchidananda Kshetram, is Trigunatit, goes beyond all the 3 gunas. So I wonder, I mean, if he would like to respond to this sort of a comparison which
Sure.
came up in my
So
mind.
actually, for bringing these in, so what I shared of the model is a very brief version, which I won't go into it. We have built beyond this some of the work of last few decades of Prasad Kayapa, who built what he calls a pyramid model. We're taking the Ichha Shakti and the Jnana Shakti and the Karma Shakti and the Tetrahord, and then the Purusha, the Chitta Shakti coming in. And we have created the practices around that, and the Yama Niyama, they come in, and then the Rajas, Tamas, and all also within that framework. So what I could do is some of what we have done in theory building as well, I could share with you, take your inputs too. But in general, what you described, that from the first insight level is true, but there is actually many deeper layers where you may be able to connect to this aspect of it.
Thank you. And I was happy to see many new participants today. And if you would like to stay in touch with us and be informed about the other activities, we have these talks weekly, and apart from that, several courses. There's a course coming up on health sciences and yoga, which will start on the 15th of September. So if you would like to be in touch with us, one way is to go to our website, which is yesspirituality.wordpress.com. And another is to drop an email, yes@yesspirituality.com. Yes, spirituality seems to be a little complicated word. We have coined it. We had to coin it because when we were setting up the website, it wanted at least 6 letters. And so yes alone was not enough. So we combined yes and spirituality to make one word. S works for both yes and spirituality. So that's how we have yes@yesspirituality.com. Aditi might have some other easier ways of suggesting how you can get onto our regular mailing list. And if there is nothing more that anyone wants to say now, then I would hand it over to Aditi to close the session. Generally, she closes it in a beautiful way with a minute of silence.
Sure. All right. Thank you. I have just written 2 email IDs, whichever you feel comfortable. You can just write an email to us and we can just add you to the list. And yes, I would just like to say thank you and offer my gratitude. It was just like for my mind and as well as for my heart, it was a good combination to just be present to your presence. So you talked about presence and I was just trying to connect to your presence is my key takeaway. So I think we can just close with a moment of silence and you can just log out as per your interest. Thank you. Thank you once again.